Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Childman panel discussion with this year's theme, Embrace Inclusion, Every Child Counts. This evening, we have a panel of professionals who will be speaking to you about early childhood education, inclusion, and embracing inclusion. This year, the Early Childhood Department of St. Kitts and Nevis aim to heighten the awareness about the increasing number of children with special educational needs, such as developmental delays and other neurodiversity challenges. Some common challenges that we encounter include autism, ADHD, ADD, Down syndrome, and various physical, speech, and cognitive delays. In early childhood education, we believe that every child is special and unique, deserving care and attention suitable for their age and developmental stage. Inclusion should be embraced in every aspect of their lives. This evening, we have a panel of a panel of persons to work with us as we discuss how we can embrace inclusion together. I am your moderator, Ms. Travia Tyson, a resource teacher in the Early Childhood Department. I will now allow my guests to introduce themselves.
Good evening. I am Charmaine Blanchett, Education Officer in the Ministry of Education, and I am the Education Officer with responsibility for early childhood education.
Good evening. I'm Clarice Cotton, retired educator and retired special education teacher.
Good evening. I am Marlene Allardyce Johnson, the guidance counselor for Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School, the special school on St. Kitts.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hadia Jeffers, first a preschool teacher, and now I am a special educator at the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School.
Okay, everyone, and thank you, ladies, for being here with us this evening. We will also introduce Mr. Paul Orchard, a parent who will be discussing his experience as a parent with a child with special educational needs. Allow Mr. Orchard to introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Philippe Orchard. Apologies, but we got the name wrong on that one. Sorry.
Sorry.
My brother would kill me if I didn't say that. So, good evening. My name is Philippe. And I'd like to thank you guys for inviting me here tonight to have this discussion.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Orchard. Ms. Blanchett, can you tell us more about the theme and why this theme was chosen for this year's Child Month?
Certainly. Our theme for this year, Child Month, is Embrace Inclusion. Every child counts. Let me say that again. Embrace inclusion. Every child counts. And this theme is a powerful call to action that highlights the fundamental importance of creating a world where every child feels valued, respected, and empowered to thrive. It's about recognizing that every child, regardless of their background, abilities, or challenges, deserves the opportunity to reach their full potential. Now, here's a breakdown of the theme. Embrace inclusion. This speaks to the need for acceptance and welcoming of differences. It means creating environments where every child feels a sense of belonging, regardless of their race, ethnicity, gender, religion, ability, or socio-economic status. Every child counts. This underscores the value and importance of each individual child. It reminds us that every child has unique talents, gifts, and contributions to make to this world.
Indeed. I do agree that every child is different and unique and should be measured according to their uniqueness. Now, why this theme? What propelled early childhood to choose this theme for this year's Child Month?
Okay, the early childhood department, we have realized that, of course, we have a lot of race, ethnicity, but those have been accepted in our society. But we have also recognized that there's an increase with children at the early childhood level with SEN, that is special education needs. Those children, they are marginalized and they are not fully accepted, they are not fully included, and therefore the theme was coined. We also realize that there's an increase in the number of students or children who have been diagnosed or who have been identified with special education needs. We have identified students who are on the autism spectrum, as you said in your introduction. We have identified students who have ADHD, attention deficits, hyperactive disorder. We have students who are intellectually challenged, students who are speech delayed, students who are physically challenged. We have seen an increase in all of the areas.
Okay, thank you. We know that special educational needs is not something new to St. Kitts. We have over the years seen it, and as you just specified, that there has been an increase. Ms. Cotton, you have worked with children with special educational needs for many years. In your opinion, how prominent has the increase been? And has there been an increase in the number of children entering school at age 5 with special educational needs compared to, say, 10, 15 years ago?
Yes, certainly there's a significant. Let us think about the Cotton Farmers School. Years ago when we started that school, the roll was 30, 36, then about 50. The roll is now 100, over 100 children attend that school. We also have many more children going out to the daycare centers, the preschools, the primary schools. And when I think about significant increase, I think about when I first studied special ed, we were told that there was 1 in every 10,000 births children would have autism. The numbers, now today the number is 1 in every 144 births. So that you
Interesting.
see that there is a significant,
Indeed.
and it's not just autism in other areas.
Okay. And okay, so there has been increase, and there has been more children are entering the Cotton Thomas. Has there been the need for accommodation to accommodate these children, and if so, what type of accommodation have been made?
Well, and as we said, more children are coming. Even when I think of early special ed, we used to go to parents and homes and ask them please to send their children. Today, the parents are coming, so I commend the parents. We don't have to go look for children. Parents are bringing them to school. And when they come to school and they have special needs, they should be accepted. They have to be taught just like other children. And so therefore accommodations should be made. How do we make accommodations? We can make accommodations to the environment. For example, if a child has difficulty with movement, you don't put that child in the middle of a room and then he has to walk over everybody to get perhaps to the bathroom. You put him as close as possible to the doorway, to the bathroom, to prevent, to allow free movement. If a child is not seen too well or wears glasses, he should be close as possible to the materials, to the board, and to everything else. So some of the accommodations are very, very simple. As the teacher plans her lessons as well and plans her day, she has to think about what accommodations should I make for this child who is having this particular problem. And if teachers do that, it makes life easier for the teacher and for the child. We also talk about strategies. How am I going to teach so that this child can learn? So that the other children in the class are not kept back, but everybody's learning. And so you make accommodations in all these areas, the child will learn.
Okay, thank you. Now, as I listened to you earlier, you indicated that you have more children going out to preschools and primary school. So, can I therefore assume that there's provision for early intervention at the Cotton Thomas, whereby if a child comes in at age 5 and that child is identified as someone who may need to return to the early childhood setting, that child is given that opportunity to do so?
Yes, at Cotton Thomas, children come in and we encourage parents to bring them in. And teachers work with them. And after a while, they may say, this child is learning, this child is progressing, he's functioning at the same level he would have been functioning had he or she been in a regular school. And so the switch is made. But we really encourage early intervention to be done as early as possible. In the preschool area, even in the nursery, we are telling parents as soon as you see something is wrong, you ask somebody. Teachers are encouraged to also make recommendations. And so you have early intervention as early as possible. I know I had one parent who called me and said, my child is at a preschool and she's not taking part in anything. And I suggested that she took the child to Cotton Thomas to see the speech therapist. There's somebody there who was trained in rehab therapy. And the other day she said, she's now in kindergarten. And none of those kindergarten teachers know she ever went to anything with special needs because she's ready. And so early intervention
is essential. Very good. Indeed. Okay, Ms. Blanchett, can you further expound how early intervention is done in the early childhood setting, as well as identify some of the challenges that you may see coming out within the early childhood setting that early intervention may be needed to address?
Okay, let me start with your second question.
Okay.
Some of the challenges that we see in early childhood. Ms. Cotton said earlier that parents, long ago, they were a bit reluctant in bringing out their children. They used to hide them away. She also mentioned the fact that parents are now bringing their children. But I'm going to put a plug here and say some parents are now bringing their children while some are still reluctant. And that is a problem for early childhood. Because when the caregivers, when the supervisors, when the teachers, when the resource teachers go in and they identify the children who are having some delays, they are not reaching their milestones. In reaching out to the parents, there are times when the parents would take the children from that center, and we refer to them as hopping children, because they would take them from one center to another center. When we supervisor in the second center identify the child, When it's time for us to get to that child hops away again, that child is gone. So we are still faced with some parents who are reluctant, and therefore it affects us having that child getting early intervention. I remember I went to one of the center, and this one was one of the government center. And the supervisor, in walking around doing my observation, I identified a child. The supervisor said, "Yes, Miss Blanchett, and I'm happy that you're here because we have identified the child." We spoke to the grandmother, encouraging the grandmother to get some help for the child. Said, "Okay." I set up a meeting with the grandmother, with the mother, with the father, and the afternoon I drove all the way over. And when I got to the village, it was like the entire village there waiting on me. And I felt this, "Oh, should I come out of the vehicle? Should I get out? Am I going to be stoned or what?" So when I went in, I used my skill and I calmed the scene, and we got to the parent. The parent was recommended to take the child to the therapy, to the speech therapy at Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School. That was another no-no. "No, I don't want my child to go there. I don't want anybody to see my child going there. Nothing is wrong with him. He's going to speak." I said, "Okay." Now, Cotton Thomas has two campuses. There's one in Boone Avenue in town, and there's also one in Estridge, as mentioned. I said, "You don't have to go in town. You can go to the one in Estridge." "No, no, no, that is even worse. That is even worse. Everybody over there know me, and I don't want my child to go down there." So that child has not gotten the treatment, the early intervention. When I go to the center, visit the center, that child is still, they're struggling. So there's still reluctance on the parents' part. As a matter of fact, after the meeting, the parent went to the school the following morning and stood out in the street and cursed at the center. It's a good thing the supervisor, the workers there, they did not respond. They allowed her to let her express herself until she got tired. The sun came up and she went home. So parents are still in denial, and that is one of the problems that we encounter in early childhood, getting the help. Another problem is that there are some who, after the child has been identified, assessed, evaluated, diagnosed, and you are found to be on the autism spectrum. Thank God we have the Spectrum Center here,
Yes.
which offers a great help and assistance. They would start the therapy. They would go 1, 2, or maybe 3 times. But that's it, because they expect miracles to happen, and it doesn't work like that. So they're not consistent, and that affects the children at the early childhood level. They're still hiding them, Miss Cotton, unfortunately. And teachers, caregivers, nursery workers, preschool teachers, supervisors, they're still experiencing problems with acceptance and parents coming out and seeking the help that the little ones do need. Of course, you ask me another, what else do we have? We have limited resources, but we are working on that. We are working with that. The early childhood department, they have some awesome resource teachers who are doing an excellent job. The supervisors, they are great. So with the limited resources, they are doing very, very well. So those are some of the challenges that we still do have. Acceptance and getting the help, the early intervention that the children need.
Sorry. One of the things that parents should note is the earlier these things are addressed, the better for the children. If I can make mention of that student Miss Cotton spoke of with the speech therapist, where she was having issues with the speech, and they took her to the Cotton Thomas for assistance. Now she's in primary school, in kindergarten, and none of the teachers knew that she went for early intervention because her speech has developed so well. So that is one of the strengths of early intervention, and parents should really come forward and allow their children to get the help that is necessary to help with their development.
And I can add to that. As principal for Cotton Thomas for over 10 years, I have seen where little ones, they would come to us from the preschool. Those are the ones that the parents have accepted that something is wrong with my child. And going through preschool, which of course is not the least restrictive environment to educate them. The least restrictive environment is where the child's need will be met. After being enrolled at Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School in the early stimulation class, the teacher worked with them. I can now identify 3 little boys. They came in from the preschool, and now they are enrolled in a primary school.
In the mainstream.
In the mainstream, because they came to Cotton Thomas early, they got the help, they got the intervention, and they are now functioning, and they are not at the bottom of the class. They are at the top. Those are 3 that were on the autism spectrum. Of course, they are still on the autism spectrum. We have students who are hearing impaired in the mainstream. So when parents identify the children and accept the children, we are able to work with them,
And give them the support.
give them the support that they need.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Blanchett. Ms. Cotton, you mentioned that you may have encountered similar issues where parents were in denial and reluctant. How do parents typically react when they receive news of their children having a delay or having been on the spectrum? What is usually the reaction of the parents?
Well, the reactions are usually mixed. Some parents are the first to realize something is wrong, especially if they had a child before. They would say, no, this one is not acting in the same manner or learning as fast as the other one. And those parents are the ones who readily accept help and seek help. On the other hand, we have some parents who are in denial. And this is understandable because every parent wants and expects a perfect child. And if you are not prepared to hear something is wrong, something is going on. And so it takes time for them to accept. And so I usually encourage teachers to work with them. Take them through the grieving process, because you have to grieve. This is the child who I thought would be the Prime Minister, and he's not talking. He's not talking at this stage. Is he going to speak? Is he going to be able to do everything? The parent is going through that. And so teachers have to help them to come to that stage and encourage them and say, you know, we can still help the child. We can still be successful. We can still help.
Okay. One of the things that, and you may agree or disagree, I think causes the parents to be in that mode of denial or very hard to accept is the public's response or the public's interpretation of their child's behavior or their child's development. Because I think to a great deal, the general public is not much educated when it comes to special educational needs, so they are quick to pinpoint and call names and, you know, degrade children. So if you can share with us your experience. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, if you can share with us, in your experience, some of the responses that you've heard or your experience with the public, dealing with the public and addressing special educational needs.
Well, we often used to talk about the stigma. People would tease. Once I remember we used to have a blue bus, and I learned long after that some teachers used to say, if you don't behave, you're going on that blue bus.
Yes.
And so on. And parents would also say, would go on that blue bus. So children and parents were afraid of
Blue
this
bus.
blue bus. Now we have the same kind of school bus like the other schools. Um, so it's no longer the blue bus. But I think we still have people who would tease and so on. But I think we have come a long way,
Compared.
because most persons accept special education now. They accept the school. They would have seen that our students have learned to do things. Many of them are out working. Um, I pass one of my students sometime, he passes me in the fire vehicle. He works for the fire department and he drives. His mother also told me he got his license for the fire truck. But they're not
Awesome.
really letting him drive that as yet. But we have, some of them work at the same preschools.
Yes.
Some of them work at Cotton Thomas as teaching assistants. A few work at the hospital. They're all over the place.
Okay.
And they're doing well. Those who, because the school had a program where we sent them out on a work-study program. Here, when they're ready to leave school, they go on a job site and learn the job.
Okay.
In most cases, they are encouraged to come back later and work.
Okay.
And they do really well. I have been invited to functions on the industrial site where persons who went to Cotton Thomas are being awarded for their good work because they're always at work and they're always doing what they're told to,
That's good.
so which is a good thing.
Yes, and I imagine that would help to, show the public that these persons may be a bit different, but they can function as normal persons as well. Okay, thank you. Okay, Miss Johnson. Now, as we speak about acceptance, in your line of work, you often deal with parents who may not believe that their child may have a delay or maybe on the spectrum. No, nothing is wrong with my child. What are some of your experiences? Talk to us about what is acceptance, how do they take these news, and what the moods and the different stages that they go through.
Okay, so we have heard a lot about denial, and once a parent learns that their child has special needs, it is very overwhelming for them. It's hard to take because here you were expecting to have a child that would be normal and not special. So that's the first concern for the parent. And they do go through the stages of grieving just as when you would have lost an opportunity or you have experienced something traumatic, you would go through different stages of grieving. And the first stage is usually denial, shock. Is this really happening to me? And so as a parent, you expected to have a child who is normal and doesn't have special needs, but here I have a child with special needs. And I'm expected to have that child enrolled at the special school, and I am not for this. So the parent will need help. Normally when the children are enrolled during the first term at Cotton Thomas, we would have the orientation sessions with them. We would sit with them and go through their concerns. We'd have to somehow educate them on the characteristics of their children. So that's where we would have to start. Most times we experience the parents being overwhelmed, they will cry openly. Sometimes they'll cry. When they do come in my office as a school counselor, sometimes they break down, but I have to help them, to reassure them, and to provide all the support we can as a team. The principal, the teachers, all on board. Teachers as attendants, looking out for them in the afternoon, making sure that they are safe, and encourage the parents. But just by a warm smile and waiting for them, that shows the care that we would have provided for them throughout the day. Denial, as we said, is a stage of grieving, and it's hard. Anyone with a special needs child know that it is not easy, it is a hard task. Children with special needs demand some amount of help that the normal child wouldn't really need. If I have already had two children and now this is a third child, I will see the differences. So it's overwhelming for the parents. And so it is important that all the entire society, I'm calling on St. Kitts public at this time to be supportive of those parents who have children with special needs. And the entire family, it is good. It would be ideal that all family members give the support. And teachers, yes, maybe not at the special school, because we have other children in the primary school who do have special needs. So those teachers in the general education setting, whatever support they can give to the parents in terms of encouraging them, and when they see that the child needs the help, be prompt in making the necessary adjustments so that they can get help. In terms of, you asked me about acceptance.
Yes.
So acceptance, as we said, the parents do go through the grieving process. And acceptance is usually the final stage. You would have denial, then there's usually anger. Why is this happening to me? So the parent may be feeling much angry that I do have a child who has special needs. They may also begin to bargain. That is another stage where they may say, I will do anything to change this. I don't want my child on the special needs, but I'm going to do everything to change this. I'll try to find another way of transport, right? Then there is sometimes they go into depression. It's not easy, as I said. And if you don't have the support, normally sometimes when a parent may realize that the father, sometimes I'm speaking on the fathers first, but I'm saying that the father for the child may not be that support, and so they really will be depressed at that time. The mother today, we have some fathers who are the main ones taking the children to school, because the mothers, we have had those experiences where the mothers don't want to have anything to do with them, right? And the father comes to us depressed. So we have to encourage and provide whatever support, whatever counseling we can for them. Then they'll go through now when they're able to get the support and the help and find other ways of coping. It is important to have to gather some amount of information on the characteristics of their child, so that will help. So when they have that support, that information, that will normally propel them and help them to accept the fact that I have a special needs child. And so with this acceptance stage, when they're at the acceptance stage, that's the time we can make our breakthrough. That's the time they will cooperate with the suggestions of the professionals, the special educators. They will now be able to be more open and listen when they're at the acceptance stage.
Okay.
Say that.
All right. Agreed. Sorry. Okay, and now, this evening, we have a parent with us who has a son who is on the autism spectrum. He's going to share with us his experiences, what it was like for him finding out, and what the journey has been thus far for him. So he's going to tell us as a child what were the things that made him, or whether the pediatrician or family member, how were you able to identify that, hey, my child is a bit different in his or her development?
Okay, good evening, everybody. So, what I would like to start off by saying is that, first and foremost, it wasn't myself, it was actually my wife who, really early on in my son's development, recognized that something was slightly different. Although he was our first child, call it mother instinct, call it whatever, but she really, really did identify something was a little bit different with our son. And I will be honest with you, I was a typical Kititian. For those who don't know me, I'm a Kititian. I was like, nah, he'll be all right. Maybe kick some football. He can be okay. And so I wouldn't say I was necessarily in denial, because with our son, with all children with any disability, it's not always as obvious to see as black and white. A broken bone, I even put it down here as an example. A child has a broken bone, you'll see it's broken. A child with special education requirements is not always as obvious to see. But that doesn't mean they don't require special attentions or special details or special assistance in certain scenarios. So we really didn't start to see it until we came back home to live, because we were living in England. We came back and a friend of ours identified, hey, your son does very similar stuff to my child, and we take him to the autism spectrum center. We should try and see if we get some help. So we did. We booked in pretty soon after. I think we were in St. Kitts probably about a month or two. We booked in and had a meeting, and since then it's been obviously a rolling stone that goes well, should I say.
Okay.
Obviously, so we point blank missed on the early intervention. Now, obviously, we won't find out the rewards from that until our son is older, because that's the truth of it. A very valuable point was made that, put the names of the ladies here, but that a lot of people have this misconception of special education or autism awareness and understanding of the timelines, the realistic timelines that it takes for your child to get better. We can't have this even 1 month, 2 month, 3 months attitude, or they're gonna be better soon. Well, it doesn't work like that. I'll be straight with you. There has been very, 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 very often times it's taken my son 6, 8, 10 a year, me repeating the same thing, going through the same process, working on things, for him to fully get it. And it goes like a light bulb effect. Those who know it, it's like click. All of a sudden it's like, why didn't you say that before? I've only been saying it for the last 6 months. But, so, and I'm sure many of the ladies here can give me many stories on those environments. So you must understand, must 100% understand, this is not a quick fix. Do not have any unrealistic expectations that you're going to send your child to, whether we can't Thomas, any of the other assets that they have in St. Kitts. 2 weeks later, my child can be fine. You've got to be honest with yourself, And what you need to understand as well is, what you class as fine does not define fine for your child. My son's fine will never be somebody else's son fine. But does that make it good or bad? Does that make it right or wrong? No, it doesn't. So you need to find your new fine for your child.
Indeed.
What is going to be the realistic expectations of my child? As Ms. Kantama said, your child going to be the next prime minister. Well, if your child has special education needs, that doesn't mean they can't be in ministry. It doesn't mean they can't eventually get to the prime minister. But we have to be realistic and look at the timeline.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the areas. The other one as well is that I wanted to highlight in my journey, this is me personally and my family, I speak for my wife quite happily, is going to the special education, going to the spectrum center is a two-way learning thing. You as a parent must learn how to now manage your child with these expectations. Equally as your child must learn how to manage their own expectations. And I want to really highlight that is a must for me personally. That's a personal must for me, because me knowing how to manage my son and how to manage certain scenarios and situations helps things be better at home. He spends a lot of time as well. So equally the educators spend a lot of time with your child at school. You need to learn how to manage things at home. So you must learn the do's and don'ts for your child. You must learn how do you progress what your teachers are telling you. You know, for example, my son, his school, they had to give presentations. My son, unlike me, I have had no problem speaking to people. But he has a real fear of public speaking and stuff. So we sat with the school and we said what we'll do is for the first time, we will do it with just the teacher. So he still has to say this out loud, he still has to keep the presentation, so he's not being treated differently by not doing the task at hand,
Yes.
but the environment he's been given
Has
is
been
slightly altered to accommodate that he's still going to do his task, he's still going to get marked for what the information is given and how he does it. He's not going to be scared or not going to be put into such an uncomfortable, he's going to freeze and say nothing and then get a failure, not because he can't do it, because the environment was not suited to give him the opportunity.
to do so.
Now, over lots of practice, he does it more regular, because that's the expectation of the school he's going to. So my point is, we as parents must give as much as the school and education system is giving. That's one of my biggest things for you. The education and the help your kids are getting does not stop at the school gate.
Yes, indeed.
Um, and we're talking basic stuff. I know the Cotton Thomas have a very good program for doing all your basic necessities, sewing, cooking, house and all that kind of stuff. But it shouldn't just stop at home. It must continue in your home. So I will encourage you to take on the basic stuff. And that's the one thing the spectrum have advised us now, because my son is 14. It's not about the big thing. It's about getting the basic things right. So it means they have a very good chance to develop into the best individual they can be.
Yes.
So I have one more thing from off the questions. Apologies. Some barriers to overcome. That was the one. That was a big one I wanted to talk about for a little bit. Stigma. Everybody's spoken about it today. Now, I'm gonna put my hand up that I was kind of on the stigma side when obviously learning about my son. Not the stigma of the whole, can't be and denial fully like that, but as in like I said already, like, he can grow, he can be alright kind of scenario. But what I will say though is, you have one shot at your child, one chance only. And I'll tell you now, look straight in the camera and tell you, you better have tried to give it the best shot you got and getting as much help as you can get before it's too late. That's the one thing I'll say to you on the barriers. The only barrier is yourself. Forget about anybody else. I'll be straight with you. The only barrier is yourself, because at the end of the day, once that chance is gone and the child is now left school, left home, that's your opportunity gone. So that'll be my one thing on the barrier. Once I found out, and the fact that I found out my son was autistic, nobody could stop me from trying to help my son the best I can. And that's what I would say to any parent out there. Nobody should stop you from looking after your child the best you can. I draw the reference to a broken bone. If your child has a broken bone, you're going to go to the hospital and get the best care for your child possible. Why is it any different for a special need, autism, or any other disability?
Indeed.
Simplest way I can put it.
Indeed, Mr. Archer. And that is so well put. And we do agree. The only barrier can be you, the parent. One of the things that I must highlight is your call for parents to understand that the learning does not only take place at the school, at the home. There must be collaboration between home and school. There must be that conversation. Hey, I noticed that every 12 o'clock, the child gets cranky. They're very uncomfortable. These are the behaviors that they display. Hey, I realize that at home, but when this happens, this is what I do. There must be that collaboration, that conversation, so that we can both work hand in hand, as you say, to make the environment, the situation, as comfortable and accommodating to the child as possible for their development.
I really couldn't agree more. We seem to find a bad attitude to talking to teachers as a seeing information. Me personally, growing up, especially where I'm growing up, it's like, oh, my teacher was bad, so all teachers must be bad. And I just throwing it out there as how it can be perceived.
Yes.
But the truth is, though, if you have a good teacher and a teacher's wanting to help you, so why you don't want to help them?
Indeed.
That's the truth. You know, like I said, I collaborated with my son's teacher when we had this situation with my son. Said to me straight that I'm a little bit worried about doing this because I don't think I can do it yet. And he said no at first, and I said, well, let's develop this. So I spoke to the teacher, and we collaborated saying that. So teachers are not, teachers have been growing up for their whole lives. They know how the world works.
Yes.
They understand the challenges. So there's nothing wrong with you speaking to them and explaining, okay, these are some of the things that my child likes or doesn't like. Which means that this happens in the classroom, you must expect this reaction.
The trigger, yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's what it's about. It's about, because then here's the thing though, if you do that with the teacher, guess what's gonna happen? Nobody's gonna tell your son or call you or send you an email or letter saying your child being disruptive in class at this time because of a scenario, because the teacher already knows, hey, the parents have already highlighted this as a common trend,
Yes.
a common scenario. Well, now we know how to roll around it, we know how to work around it, whether that's a simple remove the child from the classroom for that period of time to allow for a de-stress or a different
meltdown.
the little change of environment. You know, they're not, at the end of the day, if these things are collaborated better, they're only going to do two things. One, classroom environment is going to be significantly better. Your child is going to get the most out of it,
Yes.
irrespective. Because at the end of the day, if the class environment is better, you're going to get a better overall output from your child. So it's not hard to foresee. You know, and you might think that, oh, this is something really trivial, simple, and silly. But if you let the teachers know, they're not going to look at it as if like, oh, you know, if we give my child attitudes, they're going to be hyperactive. Well, come on. So that's nothing silly. No one's going to look at that like, and they're going to look up, well, they will just give them water. You know, these are small little changes that prevent a significant bigger thing. So, you know, think about these things when you're looking at the greater outcome while your child might be able to perceive as being disruptive, perceive as being doing things that are not the right way, and instead of just shouting and screaming, break it down to the little simple level of how do we better this overall environment to minimize the scenario to help the child develop.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Archer, and I do agree. And when we do that, we have the community effect, because many times in the classroom, when the other children realize that, hey, this has to be done in order for Tom to be okay and not to have tantrums or meltdowns, they are too going to assist and ensure that they give that support. And we see it as early childhood in the classroom. Okay, so it's a community effect. Now, as we speak about meltdowns, tantrums, many times we're in the public and we may see children having, well, we call it tantrums. Like, a few weeks ago, I'm on a bus and a child came in and the child was crying. But the cry is not a regular cry. I picked up, I guess from my profession, I picked up that there is something on the line. And persons are in the bus, well, you have to try and make it nice. Make the child hush now. Then one person turned to me and said, oh, you work in early childhood. You think it's like she has a child there crying? I said, well, I do not know why the child is crying. And that shut them down immediately. And a lot of times these things happen. The children are having episodes in public. Sometimes the parents get embarrassed because of the looks that they get. So, Ms. Johnson, I'm now going to ask you, Can you define for us tantrums and meltdowns? What's the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown, and how can we work with the children to better regulate themselves to help control these episodes?
Okay, so a tantrum usually occurs during the early stage of development. We know of the negative phase at 2 when everything is new. So they are learning. So everything you would say, they will respond to you no. And you know they get into tantrums as well. So a tantrum is actually when a child exhibits an over uncontrolled burst of anger, but they chose to do that. And it's their way of responding to frustration. It's a little power that they have.
Power
Because
struggle.
yes, they know that if I scream and if I cry, I possibly will get what I want. Sometimes they do get what I want. It's likely that every parent has witnessed the child to exhibiting a tantrum. Okay, but tantrum should gradually go away over time. So
Okay.
as they grow older, they go away. But it's part of the child's development.
Okay.
And a meltdown is a little different. A meltdown is a reaction to feeling overwhelmed. And it is usually specific to children or adults, some of them with autism. Okay, so the autistic person usually experiences meltdown. A lot of situations can trigger meltdowns depending on the person. For example, pain that can trigger a meltdown, and also unexpected changes. Persons with autism, they rather to have a specific routine. They like to know what's coming next.
Next. Yes.
And if you then have to change the day, the way things go, that isn't pleasant for them. And sometimes they will scream and get into a meltdown situation. For many kids and adults, meltdown happens when there is too much information from the senses. So, because of the makeup of the autistic person, the brain is too stimulated by certain sounds, sights, depending on the light in the room, taste,
Textures.
textures, and it gets overwhelmed processing all that information. Another term we'll use is sensory overload. So when they can't help it, it's something that happens because of their makeup and their characteristic of being autistic. Some experts really think that it's spark. They would say a flight and a flight or fight
Flight.
response,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
So intense feelings comes out in the form of yelling loudly, screaming, lashing out, and even shutting down.
And the beating
Just
of the head.
crying, right? Some of them may bang their heads because of what's happening. The sensory overload, it's happening in the brain, it's overstimulated, and they're not able to control it. It's just a response of the body to what the changes and the makeup.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, the temper tantrum, though, um, that is different because it is the child chooses to do it. So with the meltdown now, it's the body's response and reaction to what's happening in the brain. So an autistic meltdown is often mistaken for a temper tantrum,
Tantrum.
too, yes, but they are not the same. While the signs are similar, the same screaming, the yelling, the squirming on the wall, banging the head, sometimes tantrums are emotional outbursts in response to unmet needs. But the meltdowns, on the other hand, are cries of distress due to the sensory or the emotional overwhelm. Right? So, to outsiders, an autistic meltdown can look like an oversized tantrum because it's for frightening, maybe for some persons who have not had the experience, right? They often proceed they're often preceded by signs of distress or anxiety. So if you know the child well enough, you can know when it's coming.
Okay.
and then you will begin to prepare to handle the situation. Um, what triggers a tantrum though? Because they have triggers,
Okay.
right? So the little child who may be 2 years old, tantrums are normally part of the child's development, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
There, and this is how the child will express their frustration. So it is usually triggered by unmet need. So I want to do something and mommy is not allowing me. So I am going to have a tantrum here. Because once I cry out or I roll and I scream and carry on, then mommy will listen
Will allow
and I'll
it.
get what I want, right? And they'll get their way. So that can a tantrum may happen when the kids are tired too, hungry or uncomfortable. So they have some need that they want to be met. So mommy is preparing the snack, but it's taking too long and I'm hungry, so I'm gonna throw a fit here. So what triggers a meltdown now? A meltdown is an involuntary response to an overload, right? In the nervous system, in the brain there. Meltdowns can be triggered by difficulties with sensory processing communication. So they're not able to communicate.
Express,
They want to
yes.
say, I'm hot,
You can.
and turn the fan on me, but they're not able to. Instead, you're pulling the fan to yourself, and I'm hot here. So they're not able to communicate. Their emotional regulation as well. Meltdowns can be very intense and present differently from person to person. So once you know the triggers,
Then you're able
you're
to
able to adjust
adjust.
and prepare. What do you do when there's a meltdown? Okay, so you have a class of maybe 12
Yes.
most in a special school, or 6. You begin to remove the child from the setting so it doesn't disrupt the
Others.
others.
Yes.
You make it a safe place for them so that if they need to roll a little bit, they're able to do so in a safe setting, and so that they don't really bang their heads. And that's why the ideal special school, the walls should have soft
Padding.
padding,
Okay.
so that if they have to bang their head, then it will be cushioned, so they
Yes.
don't have the effects of getting a head injury or anything like that. As I said, lights can also trigger a meltdown, so it's important to pay attention to the lighting. It could be that the room is so
Too
loud,
bright.
right? Or sometimes when we have mufti days,
Colour.
then when the loud sound, we see the children, once they begin to do this,
Mm-hmm.
it means that they overloaded of the sound
The
and the
auditorium,
noise, and you
yes.
want to move them from the setting where the sound is, so that it's better for them.
Okay. And so we can agree that you have to understand the child in order to address their meltdowns. And also, while you were speaking, what came out is the fact that you have to allow the child to go through the process, but in a safe place in order to regulate themselves, so that, as you said, we can scream, we can say, give me this, but they don't understand what is going on. They're overwhelmed. So they need that time to come down from that overload. Okay, thank you. Yes, to regulate themselves. And I think it is called self-regulation. Okay. Miss Jeffers, now you've had your experience in early childhood prior to your training, teacher's training, which after you entered into special education. Can you share with us your experience dealing with children with special needs while you were a preschool teacher?
Okay, good evening again. So, some experiences that I had to deal with was first recognizing these red flags. Some tantrums, some meltdowns, some delays, of course, and then try as best as possible how I can address them. If I couldn't, try to get someone to assist me. So, of course, help and assistance from others worked, and it played a major role in my love or my
Interest.
interest, yes, in wanting to find out more about, what special needs is all about. So some of those things that I had to experience were, of course, when we're doing different activities with our smaller settings, you'd find one student can't, and it's not that they can't do it in a way that we want them to, but they're doing it in their own way. So of course you're able to identify those little patterns. You're also, another experience that I had was a child with autism. And before I didn't know about it, I didn't know much about it, sorry, but I think I had a meltdown. I didn't have a tantrum, no, learning the difference. But of course, as Ms. Johnson said, adults can have those things. And I had a meltdown where tears came and all of that because I thought I lost the parent's child, You came to school, you entrusted that child in my care, and the morning went, and then now it's time for the children to go into their areas to play, to have their little times, and I couldn't find the child. He was nowhere to be found, nothing. So I'm looking everywhere, and I'm in the process of thinking what to do, how to do it, what am I going to say, and without, informing my principal or my supervisor at that time. So I wanted to do that on my own because, of course, this is like my second, third year in teaching. And first thing I'm thinking is that I'm going to get fired. So I'm like, what to do? And of course, again, I asked for help and everything, and I couldn't find a child. So I went in, man up, and I told my principal that, my supervisor, I lost a child. And she was like, what, And everybody at this time is looking for the child. And then we went along, some of us still looking, some of us working. And then there's this student, one of my children came and said, Teacher Hadia, I found the child. Where was the child? Inside of those play cupboard areas thing, just in there. Relaxing. And when the child came out, the sweetest hug, the sweetest smile, and my name alone. And after my meltdown, I just melted away because I'm like, what could have happened, But that experience, I think, played a big part in terms of wanting to know more, wanting to get the help from me to help them better, wanting to know what I can do, what I shouldn't do, how to go about doing it, and what's not, and who, of course, in terms of the experts, which are here on the panel, who to contact to get this advice or this whole strategy of what to do in my classroom. So that was a big experience for me. I had others, but that in itself, and the student was autistic as well. So right there, I had a Down syndrome student. I had one with dyslexia and so on. But that student was, an eye-opener for me in preschool. Some experiences that I have now that I've trained and now working at Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School, I'm open to a vast opportunity, opportunity working with experts. I was placed under the care of Miss Blanchett, and everything was good. Everything was good and still is now under Mr. Doer's leadership, and there are different experts in terms of teachers who I communicate with on a daily basis. And these teachers, have over 5 years in working with special needs. So that in itself was an opportunity that I was grateful for. I have the opportunity of learning about the school itself, the history, where it was to where it is now, in terms of the population and the size, the classes. I went to Cotton Thomas on the transition when we had COVID. So we were dealing with how best not just to work around protocols that we had for the nation, but protocols for the students who have special needs, who are under our care. And we had things like the shift system, we had things like the bus system. The bus had to travel right around the island, come back, take another batch right around the island, come back. Some days you have meetings where that same bus driver maybe have to pick up parents now to come to parent teachers meetings. So imagine that alone for the bus drivers. But the children, they had to also adapt to that. They had to adapt to, hey, this isn't the norm anymore, but this is the new norm. So within that too, imagine those students that are on the spectrum, how they took that. Imagine the parents of those students as well, because everything now you have to look at whether my student is on the morning shift or afternoon shift, what to do, where to send you, how am I going to tell my boss, different things like that. So I also had the opportunity of learning more about these special educational needs. So it wasn't just autism, ADHD, Down syndrome. It was a whole other. You had hearing impaired, visually impaired. You have Fragile X syndrome. You have, let's see, no arms. Sorry. You have cerebral palsy. You have muscular dystrophy and those things. And I'm like, like how, where, why, when, and sometimes you have a class with all those special needs, you have mixed classes, and the opportunity of being there as well as seeing those teachers who have done this before me and who are still doing it was commendable, of course, and it was an eye-opener. It was a good thing for me to be around, and I welcome the opportunity and I'm thankful for it. I also had some experiences like trainings and workshops, one in particular which was the CPR training that we got, and I received 2 of those so far. One when I was a preschool teacher, of course, and the other while at Cotton Thomas Comprehensive. And that training, if you just went and just only was there for CPR or how to do the chest compressions and so on, fine. But I learned a lot in terms of, for one, how to deal with a student or a child who may be having a seizure or who is going through a seizure, and what to do, how to turn the child, what not to do, and things like that. And also how to impart that knowledge to others, So those experiences are still shaping me, and I'm grateful for them.
Okay, Teacher Hadia, how has you work in early intervention at the Cotton Thomas? How has your experience as a preschool teacher helped you, and do you find yourself going back to some of the strategies you used in the preschool classroom to help your children in the early stimulation class at the Cotton Thomas?
Yes, I did. Some of those strategies that helped while being an early stimulation teacher was a lot of sensory. So of course, coming from preschool where our resource teachers would tell us have a print a print rich class environment, So I came in, I wanted to do that, have all sorts of things on my wall, letters, shapes, numbers, colors, you name it. But then I realized, of course, you have to take into consideration your classroom size as well as the actual environment and your students that you have now. Because again, you may have students in your class who can get overwhelmed just by having too much sensory. So, whereas I'm coming and I want to do this, that, I had to limit myself, of course. In terms of the teaching process, I had things where I have like chat making, or instead of personal chats, I have to make those chats smaller now, like cue cards, flashcards, and those type of stuff. And those things worked better with my students, because now I'm able to use those cards in my daily routine. Not so much for small group time and so on, but even for after circle time, large group time, outside, you're able to use a different range of materials and books, of course. Pictures help a lot. You have things where you may use with water for our autistic children who love the water. You have other things where you have to be working holistically together. So, of course, you and your teaching assistant or your co-teacher had to be in sync, had to work together. You also have strategies coming from another teacher who is also in the early stimulation forum, because at Cotton Thomas we have 3 early stim levels. You have early stim 1, early stim 2, early stim 3. With Cotton Thomas, in terms of classes or levels, you will find some students may transition from class to class to class, like in the mainstream, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, etc. You also find that with us now at Cotton Thomas, some students may not go through the levels, but right after early STEM, they go straight to skills, because they're able to do more things with their hands. And you picked up that in the early STEM, so you tend to do fine motor skills, anything that deals with their fine motors, anything that deals with their large motors, and you find activities to surround those, of course. You also have the range of materials, of course, would come in there. The environment, if you have any barriers to your environment, you have to take all of those things into consideration. With students with autism, you have a repetition of things. You come Monday, you do one thing. Tuesday, you do the same thing. Wednesday, you do the same thing. And not, you do it at 8 and then you do it at 1. You have to keep that timeline going, of course, because they too would come up to you, I'll tell you, or they would start to have a tantrum or meltdown because you're thinking, okay, something happened. But in truth and in fact, teacher, no, you come off my schedule, You used to do something 9 o'clock. I realize it's 9 o'clock, and they can tell, they can't tell it's 9 o'clock, but they know. And you took me off my schedule, and I can't communicate that with you. So I'm going to have a meltdown, or I'm going to have a tantrum, Within the early STEM classroom as well, you have strategies such as giving clear and precise instructions. You can't treat them, or you should not treat them like the mainstream students or like everyone else. As Mr. Archer said, it's not a one size fits all. You have to know what works. You have to know what works for your class. You have to know what works for the students in your class, each student in your class. So with precise and clear instructions, you can't say, okay, we are going down the road, we are going to tie our shoes, fix ourselves, go out, make a line, look for cars, blah, blah, blah. You name it. You can't give them all of that at once. You have to first, let's tie our shoelaces and tidy ourselves. Then when you're outside, then okay, what do we do now that we're here at the end of the street? We look for cars. Where do we look? You have to give it in time, in intervals. You can't just throw everything to them at once, especially at their age, because that's early. They're not able to grasp all of that information altogether. So that in itself, you have to look at the timing. You also have to look at the same strategy from preschool can be used in early STEM, where we have that plan, do, review effect, you know, and where you plan, you have your plan for how I'm going to do this type of activity, what I want to bring out, not just the activity, but differentiation. Because again, we're here looking at inclusion, so everybody has to be included. You can't give everybody the same information or the same instruction. You have to differentiate. You have to say, okay, my autistic student is going to do XYZ, whereas everyone else may follow through with this and this and that. You know, you have it, you also, and then you do what you set out to plan, and then you review. You review where you'll be able to recap, reiterate, and just confirm or conclude what you did within that specific activity. And another strategy that works best is praising and rewards. We don't ever want to forget that, whether children or adults, we like getting nice things, we like being rewarded. So when our students or our children do something that's good, we speak to that action. Good job. I see what you did here. I see that you put the yellow on the sun, and you know, and you talk to that action, as well as you do a little reward. And it doesn't have to be something tangible or something to eat all the time. We all like to eat and drink, but it can be as simple as, okay, you get this extra half an hour of screen time. You get to do an extra hour outside riding your bicycle and stuff like that. You get to play with the ball, especially after, if you've realized that the child did something wrong or whatever. I'm talking about if they're home now, the child did something wrong and then you took away that from them. If the child did something good and the child is now rewarded, you know, you can always include that back into their schedule and give them that reward. And it helps. It helps their stimulation. It helps their self-esteem as they are. And it helps you, because that's now taking time off of you for you to relax and for you to just be in the moment, of course.
Thank you very much, Teacher Hadia. I'm sure that those teachers or parents listening, they can now take some of what you shared and put it into action. Now, we've listened to the discussion that we've had. We've spoken about the history of early intervention, the history of special education in St. Kitts. We've heard from a parent's perspective, the guidance counselor, but I would like Ms. Blanchett to share with the public what are some of the steps that the Ministry of Education has taken, and by extension early childhood, to proactively address the recent increase in special education needs in early childhood.
Okay. The parent on the panel spoke a lot about the Spectrum Center. That is one of the initiatives that the Ministry of Education has taken to address the special education needs where autism is concerned. Along with the Spectrum Center, of course, you know, UNICEF partners with early childhood. So it was earlier last year, let me not say earlier, the early childhood department partnered with UNICEF, where we have 3 phases. We had phase 1 last year. That phase looked at training of parents and staff, supervisors, caregivers at the nursery, the daycare, the preschool, both private and public centers. The parents, the caregivers, they were trained with dealing with students, children who are on the autism spectrum, children who we identify with having developmental delays, speech problems, and even those who weren't reaching their milestones. We dealt with those children and those topics. Now, out of that phase one training, we recognize that there's a need for a sensory room. And this brings me to phase two. Phase two now is the Ministry of Education phase, because UNICEF is not sponsoring this phase. It is the Early Childhood Department and the Ministry of Education, phase two. What is phase two? We are designing and structuring 4 sensory rooms. What are sensory rooms? Mrs. Johnson spoke towards the meltdown. The sensory rooms will take care of the meltdowns in the preschool. The sensory rooms will also help the children who are physically challenged, because the items that will be in the sensory room will cater to the needs of the specific challenge that the child has. So we will be on next week, Monday, we will open 4 sensory rooms. One at St. Paul's Daycare, one at Victoria Road Preschool, one at St. Peter's Daycare, and one at Tabernacle Daycare. They will be fully outfitted with, Ms. Johnson again spoke about padded. There will be padded, Ms. Johnson, so those children who are on the spectrum, who have problem banging their heads, beating their heads on the wall, they won't damage themselves, because all 4 rooms will be padded. There are children who usually roll on the ground. Their needs will also be taken care of with the padding on the ground, and the material will be child friendly. Those sensory rooms, they will also be fitted with items from that caters to the senses, whether it is tactile, visual, auditory, what's the other one? Kinesthetic. All of the materials that will be placed in the sensory room will help the children. Even when there is sensory overload, those children will be pulled out from their classes and they will go to the sensory room. The sensory room, of course, there won't be rooms for any and everybody to go in and out. The teachers or the caregivers, they will be trained to manage the children or work with the children in the sensory room. So that is phase two. Phase two, the sensory room and training of the teachers next week, Monday the 17th. We will also have training of all the caregivers in early childhood. There again, the teachers, the workers, they will be given tips and strategies in working with the special education need learners at the early childhood level. Then there will be phase 3. Phase 3, again, will do more training. Training with parents, training with workers, whether the supervisors, the caregivers, and it will be more hands-on. The special educators will go in the daycare centers, in the nurseries, in the preschool, giving training to the workers. So those are some of the things that the Ministry of Education, by way of the Early Childhood Department, will be doing for our children. And that is why we want them to be identified and not hidden or blocked, because they will be included in all of the areas that I've mentioned with the parents, the teachers. We want our children needs to be met. So again, early intervention leads to inclusion, leads to helping our children. Yes.
Yes, so as Ms. Blanchard mentioned, Early Childhood and the Ministry of Education have partnered to develop sensory rooms for children. These sensory rooms would be used for children who are on the spectrum or who may have a delay and need that extra support. Some of the persons who will be working with us in these sensory rooms are Dr. Claxton from the Spectrum Center, Miss Blanchett. When they go around to the centers, they would take these children to these centers for their therapy. What other centers who are not going to be outfitted with the sensory rooms are encouraged to do is to develop sensory walls within their center in the meantime, maybe because they don't have the space or the funding is not yet available. So they'll develop, the supervisors and their teams, they will develop sensory walls for these children. Now,
And if I may
yes.
add, one other thing that the ministry is doing through early childhood, those smaller units, they will be getting portable sensory rooms. They're not really rooms, but the materials will that will be in those portable kits, they can use them with the children.
So we are therefore making stride to embrace inclusion because every child counts. On that note, if there are anyone who wishes to call in and address any of the panelists, we'll give you that opportunity now. You can contact us at 765-3489 and we'll open the phone lines while we continue our discussion. Mr. Orchard, is there something else you'd like to share as we go along?
I'm happy you said that. I did actually have something to say. So there's something I wanted to add that is a little bit close to me personally. And when I was in high school, I was identified as having reading difficulties. And I actually went to the Cotton Thomas and was assessed there for dyslexia. It prompted me when somebody mentioned it to highlight it. Now, I am almost 40 years old and I'm dyslexic. And I'm currently waiting for the Spectrum Center to assess me for autism as well. Because at the end of the day, not because you get old doesn't mean things go away. You just learn how to deal with them. And that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight on top of what everybody was saying is, what you're trying to do is not necessarily change your child or necessarily change you and the environment you're in, but you're trying to set up your child for the best opportunity that they can do with what they have. And that's very important to understand, that I'm dyslexic. I'll never stop being dyslexic. It doesn't go away. It doesn't magically go snap and all of a sudden I'm not dyslexic. But now I worked with my mom and the Cotton Thomas at the time to develop me so I could now read a book out loud. And I still make that mistakes and I still have to accept that as a limit of my expectations. So that's why we need to make sure we have a very good, clear limits of expectations. You know, and so I want to make sure we highlight that because I'm dyslexic, you wouldn't know that. You would look at me speaking in front of everybody right here and you wouldn't know I'm dyslexic. But I did 18 years in the British Army and it was on my records as being dyslexic. So when I had an exam, I was allocated an extra portion of time. I wasn't treated any different with the questions. I was just allocated a little more time to sit and understand it. And I was actually offered on one of my exams that I could have a reader because of the scenario of the question I was doing. I was a mechanical engineer by trade, that some of the technical questions could be reworded for me if they wanted to. I didn't need it because I did not think it was required, but my point is though, when your child eventually goes to university or college, if you have all these basic criteria put in place to be highlighted, all you're doing is giving them the opportunity to excel when they get further. So that's a very important part that I wanted to highlight is the inclusion and the diversity comes from the early intervention and highlighting all the things you need to do better to help your child succeed. And that's very important that we must understand. You're doing the best you can do to make your child succeed. My parents did it with me, so I'm trying to do it with my kids. And I don't see it being any different for any other parent. That's all you're doing is just trying to do the best with what you have to help your kids get better than you know. So just bear that in mind.
For sharing, Mr. Orchard. And I find it a point of interest where you said, as an adult, at almost age 40, you have requested to be assessed for autism. No, I find that interesting because sometimes, if we are honest with ourselves, once we are educated about certain things, we sit and we say, well, I remember being this way and this triggers me. Could it be that I have, and even though I'm an adult, maybe there's somewhere that I do certain things that if I know or I understand that I'm on the spectrum or I have some sort of delay or disability, I can do it differently once I know what it means, because it may be something, why am I doing this? Why do I react this way? But if we better understand it, then we can change the way it's done, because we now know the why we are doing it. So I think that's very interesting.
It's ironic you say that. That's exactly why I'm doing it.
Oh, okay.
It's the why.
It's the why I do certain things.
Why I process things differently.
Okay.
Why, and also it helps. It will help my family and my friends around me to understand the why.
Okay.
That's very important for me as well, though, because yes, they will accept me for who I am, but if there's a reason why certain things, maybe go, why are we doing this? Or why is it done that way and not this way? Because my way doesn't necessarily mean it's right or wrong. The other person's way doesn't mean it's right or wrong. But in my head, it's
That's
that
the way you process it.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's the little things that the reason why I ask. And also, I want my kid, my son, to know, hey, it's okay to be autistic.
Yes.
It's not all bad. And it also means that I try to share my experiences with people, because at the end of the day, you never know when somebody's going through something.
Yes.
And so you never know, as I said, we talked about some of the triggers of the understanding or the reaction to finding out that your kid has autism or spectrum or any disability. But it's very important that, I think we have a caller.
Seems that way.
Not a problem.
Good evening, caller. Thank you for calling in. Do you have a question? Hello? Okay, I think we lost that caller. So you can call back in if you were trying to call just now. The number is 765-3489. As you spoke, what came to mind is, how do you feel now as an adult? Do you feel that some of whatever is the why you want to be tested, do you feel if it was addressed earlier, if it may have been better for you or made things a bit easier for you?
I think it definitely would have made things easier. Certain scenarios, definitely.
Okay.
There's no question about that.
Okay, I think the person is trying to call in again. Let's see if we can get that call. Good evening, caller. Okay, I think we lost that call again. Hello?
schools that I found. We had highlighted it before, but I didn't take something like that.
Hello, good evening.
There were some issues with the phone.
Hello. Go right ahead, caller. Okay, so you can go ahead and continue answering the question, Mr. Orchard.
So the thing for me is basically if certain scenarios I understood in my career would have been treated differently, or I would have looked at things differently, it would have made things more understanding to me. Like for example, like map reading. Most people hate map reading. I found map reading, I see maps in 3D almost. I can see things differently to the average individual. So now that was a good thing for me, for the environment I was in and the job I was doing. Okay. So for that particular job, that was a bonus to me. But what was maybe not a bonus was some of the social environments or some of the social things that I didn't necessarily connect with some of the guys in the environment I was with. So if I had had that knowledge or had that experience given to me at a younger age to learn how to manage and cope, that would have I dealt with things differently. And so so that's why
early intervention
you know,
is
so,
indeed, yes.
And the thing is though, even if I always try to be realistic, let's be honest, if I am 100% perfect, 100% perfect, not saying I am, but I'm saying I'm 100% perfect, but somebody else is not 100% perfect, but they get a 10% increase, a 10% better outlook at life, the 10% better. So we got to start looking at your gains are not going to be 100%.
Yes.
I'm going to use an example, but,
yes.
But hypothetically, you're saying you want it to be the best gains you can get. And
yes.
that will work with both helping the partners and stuff. So you're looking at getting the most gains you can get out of it, whether it's 10, 20, 40, or all of it. So we need to make sure we understand that you're trying to get the most out of the environment you and your child has before they grow up into adults.
Yes, indeed.
And that is why early intervention is the key.
Yes, so indeed, early intervention is important. So parents need to understand that it's not really about, oh, what are my neighbors, my friends going to say about my child? But it's about, why don't I give my child the best opportunity to develop into the individual that they want to be? As Mrs. Blanchett said, they may not become the next prime minister at age 40, but who knows, later down they may become, they feel like, okay, I'm a bit, yes, working an advisor, something, right? A delay does not mean an impossibility. It just means it takes a longer time to get there. Okay, caller, you're on the air. Go right ahead. Hello? Hello?
Do you want us to go old school and put it to the mic? Just put it on speaker and put it to the mic if you want.
Okay, so as we try to get the calls to connect, good evening, caller. You're on the air. Go right ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for calling in.
Just a question. Are there levels or stages in autism? Sometimes you may say something is like they just slightly have it, or it can be severe. Is there such a thing with autism?
I'll allow Miss Blanchett or Miss Cotton to take this. Okay, so the question is, are there different levels in autism? So I'll allow Miss Blanchett, Miss Cotton, or both of them to respond to this question.
Okay, like all challenges, all disability, we refer to them either as mild, moderate, severe, or profound. Autism is no exception. Autism is also a spectrum, and it's because they present differently. A child might be on the autism spectrum and is extremely talented, gifted in math. Another child on the autism spectrum might have no inclination for math at all. So there are different ranges, of course, as I said earlier, it can be mild, severe, profound, moderate. Yes, but once identified as having autism or is on the spectrum, that child will be identified as an individual with autism. Okay? Did I answer your questions, or you want to hear about the stage level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7?
Okay, thank you, Miss Blanchett. So, as Miss Blanchett indicated, with autism, you have mild, moderate, severe, or profound. And as such, where Mr. Archer shared that his son, you would probably say he's high functioning, which means that he functions as a normal person, sorry, as a child who is developing normally, so you may not easily identify that he's on the spectrum. Some children, you may identify them because when they're overly stimulated, they may put their hands over their ears or they make a sound, and these are some of the ways in which we may identify them. And that is why it is important for you to get that assessment and for you to understand the level that your child is at so that you can find the best strategies to work with your child. Because whereas my child may be high functioning or your child may be high functioning, my child may be moderate or profound, which means that the strategies that I use for my child, the timelines that my child meet may not be the same that yours meet. Yours may be at a faster timeline than my child. So early intervention, assessment, and support is very necessary. And we open up the lines again to see if there's anyone else who may have any questions.
Can I just say something on that?
Sure, go ahead.
There is a number that you can call for the Spectrum Center as well if you have any inclination that your child is on the spectrum. It's 869-76, sorry, my apologies, 869-669-3767. I'll say that again, 669-3767. So if you have any inclination that either your child, it could be a grandchild, it could be any child, a friend, a family, and you think that this child would require some sort of help, and I'm sure the ladies will have another number to give you very shortly, because at the end of the day, even if you go for the assessment and they say, I apologize, but I don't think your child is autistic, or you go to the Con Thomas and they say, I don't think your child has a learning disability, we just need to work on some extra stuff. What have you got to lose? That's a question you got to ask yourself. What have you got to lose? You lose maybe an hour your time. You catch on coming from, but at the same time, what do you have to gain now? You got to look at what you have to gain. What you have to gain is incredibly outweighs any of that 1 hour time you've lost. Okay?
Yeah, and you asked about the level, and I mentioned the spectrum. We have to understand that each child presents differently on the autism spectrum. If there are 100 persons in the room, all autistic, they will present differently. So as a special educator, we try not to label the child as at a stage 1 or level 2, level 3 or level 4. We
Okay, and it seems that we have another call, so we'll allow the person to ask their question. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I am just curious, maybe I missed it, I'm not sure. But I think for clarification, what, so the children who are in preschool who should be going over to primary school, what, who are on the spectrum? So we're looking at the spectrum children.
Yes.
Are we saying that they are free to enter into the primary school program? And if that is the case, what would be the interventions that they will be given to these children? Because as far as I know, we don't have IEPs. So how does this work?
Okay, Ms. Blanchett, I'll allow you to answer this question.
Okay. As I said earlier, when we look at a challenge, which autism is one such challenge, whether it's severe, mild, or moderate, or profound, depending on the level that the child is at, there are some children who can function in the regular school, in the mainstream schools. And we do have children who are on the autism spectrum who are in the mainstream. I mentioned earlier about the 3 students who came early at Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School, and from the early simulation class, they were sent back to the mainstream. The teachers there, we would work along with the teachers, the special educators, the staff at Cotton Thomas. They would work along with the teachers in the general education teachers in offering strategies and tips to work with those students. Also, the Autism Spectrum Center, those workers headed by Dr. Clarkson, they would go into the schools where the children are, and they would work with the teachers, offering tips and strategies in working with the children who have been identified to be on the autism spectrum. Of course, some of the children, because of the level where they are at, they might not be able to return to the mainstream. They might just leave the preschool, head straight to Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School. I spoke earlier about children being educated in the least restrictive environment. Sometimes the least restrictive environment can be the primary school, the main school, but there are times when the least restrictive environment is Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School, where those children needs can be met. Not all of the children who are on the autism spectrum will remain at Cotton Thomas. I said earlier, some will go back in the mainstream, and there are some who will stay at Cotton Thomas until it's time for them to leave at the age 16 up to 18.
Thank you for your question, caller, and I hope that answers your question.
If I may add also, if your child has been diagnosed with autism, then there is the network. That child would be in the data pool, and the workers, the individuals, the staff at the Spectrum Center, they would be working with your child even from the preschool level, and that is what we want, the children to be identified early so we can begin working with them at the preschool level. When they leave the preschool, as I said earlier, to the primary school or to Cotton Thomas, their needs will also be met. They will continue to get the therapy that they need.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Blanchett, you mentioned the children leaving Cotton Thomas and going to the mainstream. I can recall, okay, we seem to have another caller, so I'll hold. Go ahead, caller. Good evening. Good evening, caller. Thank you for calling.
Good evening. Um, speaking about the preschool area, but for me, I'm thinking about the nursery, where there are children, where, maybe they're not being diagnosed, but they behave from my experience. I might see a child who have the symptoms. But I think that someone, because it's very difficult for a teacher to have at least maybe at least 10 children in nursery 2. Let's start with nursery 2. And then a child who is autistic or has autism. And then you have to be looking out for this child, still paying attention to the other 9. I feel that someone should be placed in these areas to help the teacher to kind of control that child or to look out for this child. Because it's very, very difficult. Because these children in these areas is vulnerable. And I think that I've been saying forward, and I may be wrong, so Miss Blanchett or Miss whoever the panel can correct me. Because it's needed. It's really, really needed. Very difficult. And I love children, and I don't like to see children like to be left behind. Because everybody should be like looked after in the level that they are. So if I'm wrong, just correct me, but I think that we need some help in that area, in nursery, not the preschool, nursery. Thank you very much.
Okay. And I agree with you. They are very difficult to work with, but once you love them, you realize it's not too difficult. And I said earlier that one of the thrust that the Ministry of Education through the Early Childhood Department will be having is workshops. I also said that on Monday the 17th from 9 a.m. up to 12 a.m., special educators will be working with nursery supervisors, the nursery teachers, all the caregivers. As a matter of fact, I want to believe that the centers will be closed to accommodate the training. The sensory rooms that will be furnished, and of course it's only 4 rooms, but the teachers, again, the caregivers will be pulled out, trained so that they will be able to work with those special need learners.
Is the next call? Okay. Good evening, caller. Go right ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for calling.
Good evening, panelists. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
I would like to congratulate you on the theme, Embrace Inclusion, Every Child Counts. Awesome. Now, from what was explained earlier, tantrum is when the child chooses to display certain behavior because they want something, whereas a meltdown is when they are in distress. Is there an easy way for parents to tell the difference? That's 1, 2. Now, for a child who is throwing a tantrum, the parent may be willing to give in easily because they don't want to see the child behaving in a particular manner. What advice do you give to that parent?
Okay, I will answer. As I said before, a tantrum usually occurs to children who may have their unmet needs. So as I said, a child who may be 2 years old may throw a tantrum because they may want to have their own way. They may want to go outside and hear mommy says, do not go outside. So they want to do that. What is best is at an early age, because as a child is developing, the parent will have to begin to train them. They can't wait until they're older they will have to start early. And as you ask, what should the parent do? As much as possible, ignore some of the behaviors and deny certain responses that the child would expect. So if they do cry for certain things and are having a tantrum, they should not always be given immediately, so that later on they learn to cry for things and they get to have their own way. A meltdown, as I said, is different from a tantrum. A meltdown is something that cannot be controlled. It occurs as a result of sensory overload. So then what has to be done, the parent would have to, or if they're in a school setting, they would have to get the amount of support to help them through the process. When they are calm enough, then if you're able to communicate with them as much as possible, we sometimes may have to use communication board for them to express themselves. They may be just wanted to go to the bathroom or something simple. Then they will be able to express themselves as much as possible. If it's non-verbally, they will have a way to communicate. So once they're out of the meltdown, then you'll be able to find out what it is that they need, or you will be able to monitor and determine, is there too much noise in their surroundings, and then you adjust to help them through the process. As I said, a tantrum is a normal part of a child's development. However, the difference between the tantrum and the meltdown usually occurs to children who are mainly autistic. But the tantrum will occur with normal children. That is part of their development. For the autistic child, they will experience meltdown. So as long as as long as they continue to live, we have adults with autism who sometimes do have a tantrum, who do have a meltdown, and they could be in their 48 years of age. They would have a meltdown because they're autistic. But a child with tantrums sometimes get over it as they grow older. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
you're welcome.
Thank you for calling, caller. Is there another call? Okay, so we'll continue. Ms. Blanchett has something to add to that caller who called before.
Yes, I was saying that along with the sensory rooms and the training of the caregivers, that's the nursery workers, the supervisors, the teachers, the Ministry of Education via the Early Childhood Department, discussion is going on as to how best we can meet the needs of the children. Do we add more special education trained individuals in the department? Do we have more workshops? Do we have more one-on-one? And we are even thinking of developing IEPs for those children so we can better able work with them and support the teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Blanchett, and thank you, Ms. Johnson. As this conversation has been going on this evening, and we realize that there has been some progression over the years. So we are not there at the mark that we want to be. We are not there yet, but we are getting there. We have begun the conversation, and we know that parents, caregivers, childcare workers, we are anxious and we are excited, and we are desperate for answers and solutions. But as Mr. Orchard said, it's not a quick fix, and it's not something that happens overnight. And it takes time, and it takes support, it takes acceptance. So it has to be a community working together. And the more that we accept, the more that we seek the information, the more that we support each other, the more we'll get done and the further we will get. Anyone else wants to share?
Yes, and that is why we have the theme. Embrace inclusion. Every child counts, because we realize that there we can do more, and it's in the pipeline, if I may say. Plans are in place for more to be done. So parents, we are there for you, and that is why we have this panel tonight. So we are asking you as much as possible to call in. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. We will answer as much as we can. And of course, if you can't get to us tonight, it's okay for you to visit the early childhood department. Of course, now, because it's the child month, they are scattered. They are now located at the AVEC Center. But you can still come to Victoria Road upstairs. You will find somebody there, and you can ask a question. Okay?
Yes. Thank you very much, Miss Blanchett. And if there are no more callers, okay, so as I said, this conversation does not end when this panel discussion ends. We are going to be having this conversation throughout the month, and going on, it would not end after June. We will continue this conversation because this is the reality that we are presented with. And we would like to see how much we can do for our children as they grow. So it has been great speaking with you ladies this evening. A wealth of information has been shared, and we hope at least one person feels less uneasy about their child. We also hope to see all children in the match on Friday the 28th of June, as we continue to encourage everyone to embrace inclusion. Let us all use this opportunity to show the public that every single child counts. My child counts, your child counts, every child counts. So let us use this opportunity to don't keep them at home. Let them come out. And the Ministry of Education and Early Childhood, we are going through the extent to make sure that the match is accommodating to every child. There are some measures that are going to be put in place that you won't be disappointed. Okay? We are turning every stone to make sure that every child is accommodated for, because what? We have to embrace inclusion. We have to work together to get the message out there, to show these children that you are a part of society, we love you, and you are important too. Okay? And if there is no more question this evening, as Miss Blanchett said, you can reach out to the Early Childhood Department. You can reach out to Miss Blanchett. You can even Teacher Hadia. Teacher Hadia, I want to ask a question. Any one of us that you see, and if we do not know the answer, we are going to direct you to the correct place. So do have a good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. And don't forget, support early childhood and the Child Month, because embrace inclusion, every child counts. Thank you.